FTN, welcome.
Good
It's
evening.
another edition of the Seattle pod. Of course, I'm not a Seattleite. And if you guys haven't heard and you're living under a rock or you've had the group chat muted since the offseason, JD no longer lives in Seattle. I actually kind of forget when that move even happened. Was it during the season or was that this offseason?
It was mid-season, and I will say that was probably why I didn't win the championship this year. There was just too much going on to adequately manage my fantasy roster.
There's so much going on. I just found out that Jack got a kitty. He and Yulia. I don't know if she's going to make an appearance, but Jacob and I saw her real quickly. She's a cutie. And then I saw Jacob's cat walking around back there too. We've had a lot of animals on the podcast recently. I don't know. It's a good development for the league, I guess, to have all these pets. But speaking of pets, my favorite pet, Aaron Judge. You want to dive right into this, Jack, because he found a new home this off season.
He did. He found a home worthy of him, finally. I mean, how do you think this trade came together, Drew? Because, I mean, I definitely have my perspective on it. I was going for Juan Soto. Well, Aaron Judge was the consolation prize. But
I'm just mad that the real prized asset in that trade, which is Ryan Nelson, of course, which was that was scheduled to be coming my way before you unfortunately swooped in there, blocked that one. So, anyways, you can talk about Aaron Judge, I
well,
guess.
at the very end, when Drew and I were negotiating like final terms, we were looking for a balancing piece, and Ryan Nelson just appeared to be of like approximately the right value. And Drew had gone silent on me, and I was like, "Oh shit, is he gonna like blow up this trade?" And then I just got a middle finger emoji text from Jacob out of nowhere, and I was like, "Oh, okay, my deal's locked in. My deal is good. This means that I just snaked Jacob's, main offseason acquisition target of Ryan Nelson."
Would have
It's
been my
funny that
SP.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that though about Ryan Nelson sneaking in there and then all these other trade conversations. I think Ryan Nelson and Aaron Judge. I think that day I was having negotiations with at least half the league on both of those guys,
Mm.
and so it wasn't for lack of Jacob's trying. Jacob even texted me later. He's like, "Dude, I'm sorry. Like I'm even happy that you would even text me back when those negotiations for Judge were in the works." And a couple of other guys were texting me about Judge. There were some frameworks done. Let me ask you this before we dive into the trade specifics. You and I have been trying to make a trade for years. In fact, actually, I think you've probably tried to trade with me more than I've tried to trade with you. I've been very hesitant to trade with you and Sean. Did you think that you and I were even going to make a trade this offseason, let alone for Aaron Judge?
No, absolutely not. So I mean, I've been going for Logan Gilbert for years. We had some brief Gunnar Henderson conversations before he came up to the big leagues
One
that
way chatter.
I don't recall it that way. I think there was a chance. There was an opening. You sent me a counteroffer, and at the time, I just didn't like it. And we'd have to go back and look into it. But whatever that counteroffer was, I clearly should have taken it, given where it turned out. There was no price I really shouldn't have paid. But the last time we traded was, I think, the very ill-fated trade for you. I sent you Tyler O'Neill and received Sandy Alcantara in return, which, I mean, it's not the craziest, most lopsided trade in league history, but I definitely got the better end of that, I would say. So no, I didn't expect to see you as a trade partner.
I was trying to remember the last time we made a trade too, and I actually didn't go back and look, but I also thought that was the last time we traded, and that was probably 2022, maybe. It's been a
Yeah.
while.
Wasn't Sandy a Cardinals guy that was involved in some trade for like dirt cheap? Were you just taking a lesson
Yes,
from your favorite team there? Or?
the this was before this was after Sandy was a Cardinal. This was, I think, the year before his Cy Young season. It was like halfway through that year. So, but yes, the Cardinals have traded, unfortunately, way too many good prospects to Florida. Both teams down there in recent years. Part of the reason why we've had such rough seasons the last couple of years is because we've made some really bad trades. Jack, let's talk about Aaron Judge. Yeah, and we're going to talk about multiple trades that were happened this offseason. We started with this one because we got Jack and I on.
We'll keep it quick.
What does Aaron Judge do for your team, and what does losing Bryce Harper do for your team?
Losing Bryce Harper does very little for my team because you baked in a ready-made Bryce Harper replacement for me in the deal and Mark Vientos, so thank you. But in all seriousness, I already had corners pretty well covered between Matt Olson, Christian Walker, and Jose Ramirez. So add in Vientos, I really just don't have a need. Whereas Harper no longer has outfield eligibility, so the outfield eligibility was big. Judge is just a better player also. Probably a little bit more of an injury risk given that he's still in the outfield, but the stat differences are pretty significant. So he was just a much better piece. And then parting with Brian Wu, I'm a big Brian Wu fan. I have to rename my team now, which is probably the biggest loss of this entire trade. Or I just don't, or I just keep it because I still like Brian Wu. And that's one less Mariner for me to root for. But I'm a little concerned about some maybe unaddressed injury issues with Brian Wu. Maybe Jacob will speak to that as well as a Mariners fan who's kind of watched Wu go through it through the last couple of years. For the Mariners' sake, I hope he's good. Like, I will not be upset if he's very good for your team. But I think he's one of the more risky assets you can own as a pitcher in the league.
I agree. Brian Wu is super risky. I just also view Judge as at least a little risky given injury history. I know he's actually had a couple of healthy years here. I've struggled, man. My first base has been, it was Eric Hosmer, then it's supposed to be Chris Bryant, then it's supposed to be Joey Meneses. It's been a real struggle. So getting a locked in first baseman feels really good, even though it did cost Aaron Judge. If Brian Wu is as good as advertised and is as good as he can be, I think I'm in a great position. I think I'm in a better position than before having made the trade. So I like it. I think a lot of the league might not feel it's the most unfair trade, but I do think people have some strong opinions on it. I don't know. It was an interesting trade. I never thought I'd be trading with you, Jack. I've made it my mission to not trade with you because I don't want to bail you out of all of your bad decisions the past few years. When I say bad, I mean short-term decisions. Like, and then finally, Jack has a hole. We've been waiting for cracks in your team to surface for years to signal your downfall from the top of your division. And it's like, Jack doesn't have a good outfield anymore. Like, this is his crack. And then I give you Aaron Judge. So I didn't stick to my kind of guns on that one. I kind of bailed you out a little bit, but it was at the cost of making my team better, I thought. And I don't care too much for Vientos. I've seen enough to think he's going to be an RBI machine and he's going to be about that. He's going to be a worse version of Pete Alonso. And I don't like that.
Jacob, what do you think? What do you think of this trade?
I appreciate that you guys were able to get it done with like marquee fantasy assets first and foremost, because there's a lot of trades in this league, myself included. I'm very guilty of this, where people will haggle over the dregs. Ryan Nelson is a good example of this. Like we couldn't come to an agreement on Ryan Nelson, and just the fact that this was like, it was Judge, Vientos, Harper, Jackson Jobe, who was a consensus top pitching prospect. Glad you guys got it over the finish line. It makes it interesting for sure. I am probably in the camp that I think that the trade isn't as like value lopsided as some other people are saying. I think it makes sense from a value perspective from both teams, but I don't fully understand, Drew, your side for retooling at this point in time. Last year I thought that your team was potentially better than your record was showing. I thought that you did have genuinely a top 4 roster, like right knocking at the door, the top 3. And me personally, I would have liked to see you just run it back, maybe with a couple additions on the pitching side instead of just retooling. I think your roster is still really solid, like you didn't blow up your team or anything like that, but it's not what I personally would have done. I think that if you believe in the guys that you got, like Brian Wu, if he, on a rate basis, he's a top 10 pitcher in the league and has been the last 2 seasons. If he's able to stretch out to like 150, 170 innings, that's a very, very solid asset. Injury risk is there, but if you believe in those guys, they've got the potential to really make up for what you were saying. And I agree with your statement that Judge, he's put together a couple healthy years the last couple of years, but I mean, he's 33, he's like 6'10" or whatever he is. I don't know, monstrous size guy. Those guys usually don't last like super long into their 30s, especially when the bat speed starts to go. So we'll see what happens.
He and Bryce Harper, for those of you who don't know, I've said it to a few. He and Bryce Harper are 6 months of age difference apart. Bryce Harper is no spring chicken anymore. I get the risk, but before Jack joined, the one thing I was saying, Jacob, and then we'll move on from this trade unless anyone has anything else they want to say. But like, I barely made the playoffs. It came down to the final week of the season with a 95% healthy Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, MVP level seasons from those guys. I could not count on that again. I realized I was not as close to being the elite team I wanted to be. And so I got to continue to retool. And I think Brian Wu has a better chance of being an impact ace than Jackson Jobe does. And I didn't think Vientos was going to be the guy for me. So, continue to add, try to get better this year. And it's just going to be a gradual, I think, improvement for my team is what I'm hoping for.
Okay. Well, what about the Sean trade with Vinny? I think that's the most recent kind of blockbuster move. Do you have the pieces in front of you, Drew?
I do. I do have the pieces in front of me. So Giancarlo Stanton, Kumar Rocker, Chase Petty, and Tin Band. That goes from Sean to noted Yankees fan Vinny. Vinny gets Giancarlo, who I guess with the Yankees now bats fourth or fifth this year, which I guess is probably about where he was batting last year. At least that's where they had him in the playoffs because he was hot. So Vinny gets Giancarlo, but obviously the biggest piece moving back here is Randy Arozarena to Sean. Another team, he had a disappointing year last year. It was very unhealthy. It was like kind of the opposite of me. I was very healthy and I barely beat Sean. If Sean has a healthy season and he adds a Rosarena, Sean's got to be the favorite for the wild card now. What do you think? Either of you?
We'll start with you, Jacob.
Am I alone in thinking that the best asset in this entire trade might be Kumar Rocker?
You're not alone, I think, in that.
I don't like this trade for Sean, gonna be honest. Kumar Rocker was my guy, by the way. I traded, so I was mad because I traded Kumar Rocker and Robert Callas for Aaron Savali, which was easily the worst trade that I made last year. And Kumar Rocker was just exploding through prospect charts last year. Obviously, he used to be like a top guy, then had the injuries, some contract stuff that was weird. And now he's back, and the numbers that he was putting up last year were very impressive. I think Kumar Rocker is going to be, if he's healthy, he's a good pitcher, very good pitcher. And Randy, I mean, Randy's a good player. I like rooting for Randy. Everybody in Seattle likes Randy, but just his profile in Seattle, especially, I'm not sure it tracks super well, especially with some of the power stuff that people have come to rely on from him. Tampa Bay is not a great place to hit either, but I mean, Seattle's a whole nother beast. He's still going to put up good on base percentage numbers. He's going to hit in the middle of the lineup, so he'll get some runs and some RBIs. But I'm not sure that we're going to see the best version of Randy going forward. So just purely from a dynasty perspective, I kind of like what Vinny was getting there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and the other pitching piece, you said it was Chase Burns, right, Drew?
Chase Petty.
Oh, okay, because that's okay. Who's Chase Petty? I don't know who Chase Petty is.
He's another Cincinnati Reds pitching prospect, but had a terrible year last year. Lost a lot of pedigree, you could say. He was kind of borderline top 100 entering the year, and now he's maybe borderline top 200. Who knows? He's a piece. I don't know how that one snuck its way in there, but I don't know. It's like the prospect version of Ryan Nelson.
What this really does from Vinny's perspective, right? Like Randy is still kind of a win now piece, which is why Sean goes and gets him. And I still think, like, I agree with Jacob that T-Mobile is a bad place to hit as a right-handed hitter who you hope to get some power from. But he's going to hit between third and fifth, probably third or fourth in the Mariners lineup. You could probably still peg him for like 80-20, 80-20, right? That's probably what his stats are going to be. Like maybe the 20 homers doesn't quite come, but he could very easily steal 30 bags. He's going to play every day. He's not really an injury risk. Like he's a solid bankable piece, which I think it makes sense for Sean to go get him. I don't know why you would want to roster Giancarlo Stanton. Certainly if you're Sean, right? It's great for Sean to get rid of him. I don't really know what Giancarlo does at this point in his career for Vinny. So it's really just feels to me like this was Randy for Kumar Rocker. And it's good from a dynasty perspective for Vinny, but it's kind of a weird pairing between the two teams because Vinny's also trying to be competitive. Vinny's clearly the favorite for the wild card above the whole grouping of teams in your division, Jacob. I think we should probably touch on your division, but I think you would still put Vinny as a wild card favorite above whoever finishes second in your division. So I don't know. It's a weird move, especially with kind of strong pitching, right? Vinny has, when I think of his pitching, he's got, Garrett Cole. Let me pull up his roster. I think of Cole, Schwellenbach. Who else does Vinny have? I'm just going to look at it really quick. That's Ryan. I saw Polsky.
His top pitchers go Garrett Cole, Mike King, Spencer Schwellenbach, Nate Eovaldi, Jose Barrios, Sean Manaea, and then he's got a couple of other interesting names like Bobby Miller and Matthew Boyd in there. So to your
Ranger
point,
Suarez, Max Meyer. Yeah.
to your point though, Vinny is strong on starting pitching. He and Perry are like the kings of having super exciting pitching guys, like in a pitching staff. I don't know if he needed to add another young guy to that mix.
At the cost of like bankable outfield production. Yeah. I mean, I think this trade can go either way. I think it's puzzling from both parties. I'm not sure there were really winners to be had here. Sean gives up a good dynasty. I mean, maybe Sean just because it's clear that he got better now, and I don't think it's clear that Vinny got better now. But I think in the long run, if Kumar Rocker is what we think he might be, this will be a trade that we think. I think Vinny wins.
Yeah, it's certainly a trade, and I think I have to agree with you. It's confusing for both parties. Let's talk about a trade that happened kind of earlier when we first opened the window here, since we got Jacob on. So Jacob, you traded your arguably best offensive piece last year, Josh Naylor, at the premium position of first base, which we know is very hard to find. You traded him for Jordan Lawler and Justin Crawford, and that was with Ryan Ulrich. What was the thinking there?
Yeah, there's no argument about it. Josh Naylor was my best player and would have been my best player this year too. My other best player, Anthony Santander, was shipped off at the trade deadline last year too. So, there's a pattern here. It's not really a secret what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get value for guys that I don't think I'm going to get value for later, potentially at the expense of a lot of offensive production. Him being a first baseman especially is something that made me kind of double take when I was looking into this trade. I feel a little better when Cody Bellinger got signed by the Yankees, honestly. Like, I think I made this trade probably like a couple hours after that was announced. Who knows? I might be the only guy who's still in on Bellinger, but Bellinger is still first base eligible. He can still provide big numbers. I don't think I was ever going to get anything better for Naylor, especially with him moving to Arizona, which isn't the best place for left-handed power hitters. I've needed a shortstop ever since, literally all of my shortstop prospects get moved off the position. So no luck there. Jackson Holiday got moved. I was looking at, he's still on my roster right now. Perdomo is not going to be on my roster for much longer. He's basically just the placeholder for Jordan Lawler, who I'm kind of penciling in now as my shortstop going forward until inevitably he gets moved off the position too, for whatever reason. Then I'll be back in the market. So let me know if you got shortstop prospects. I'm always willing to buy.
Colt Emerson, Jordan Lawler, Jackson Holiday if he plays shortstop.
Matt Shaw was listed there at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nick Gonzalez got moved, although he's debatable if Nick Gonzalez is a viable fantasy asset. I still believe, though.
I do think you might be in luck, Jacob, because when when MLB published their top 100 prospects, oh my God, yesterday, it's felt like it's been so many days since then. So since MLB published their top 100 prospects yesterday, they have a record 25 shortstops in the top 100. So the talent is out there to go in.
Everyone's a shortstop till they're not. I mean, that's the thing. I bet half those guys even play, and a fourth of them stick at the position. Sure.
You just need one of them to stick, right? You only have one spot that actually has to be a shortstop in your roster. I was just quite annoyed last year that I couldn't even get one.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, I think that's kind of, maybe we take a break on trades for a sec, and I want to transition to Jacob, your thoughts on, your positions in the power rankings. As somebody who, finished on the podium last year, your team has not been getting a lot of respect from your fellow division members, from various power rankings, from many people in our group chat. So,
from Ben's models.
From Ben's incredibly sophisticated models. And I know you have your own models, so maybe we can touch on that too. But just at a high level, what do you expect from your team next year? Do you think you can repeat? Do you think you're the favorite to repeat?
My own models aren't putting me in any better position than Ben's are. I'll just put that out there. But no, I'm definitely not the favorite. My whole thought with this stuff is I need to get the economy going. That's how I'm going to set myself up for success in the next few years. So that's kind of been my main focus both last year and this year. accumulating Bam, accumulating good dynasty pieces that are younger guys. I'm certainly not in the position where I was last year because of my drafting prowess, right? Like I drafted Trey Turner, Jackson Holiday, and Evan Carter with my first 3 picks, and none of those guys were contributing to my team come playoff time. So yeah, I mean, my whole thought with this stuff is like I want to set myself up to be in a position to compete long term. I'm not going to sell out just because I had a run of luck last year and was able to sneak into the championship game where I was very rightly drubbed by Adam. That didn't give me any like illusions that my team is better than it is. So I'm just trying to keep making what I think are smart moves for the future of my team. And that's really it. I definitely wouldn't be placing any money on me to win the division.
So building on that, then, who do you think has the strongest team in the division this season?
Graydon. I still think it's Graydon. I thought it was Graydon last year, and I think that it's Graydon this year. Ryan's team is a lot improved versus last year, but Graydon was starting with such a monumental gap, just purely in terms of roster talent over the two of us, that I don't think we've closed that gap yet. I think that his team is the strongest, even with some of the trades that he's made, which arguably has made his roster slightly worse. Tooling up for the future a little bit, I still think he's the favorite.
Let me ask you this when it comes to Graydon versus Ryan. So, right, last year in the first 3 rounds, I think we saw both Paul Skeens taken by Ryan, Wyatt Langford taken by Graydon. Obviously, they're going to be linked just like along with Dylan Cruz because they are all in that same draft class. Who would you take today? Would you take Paul Skeens or Wyatt Langford?
Ooh, I might go against the consensus here. I feel like most people are going to say Skeens. I would actually take, well, one, I would take Jackson Churio over all of them, but two, I would probably take Wyatt Langford above Skeens, just because I feel like there is enough pitching talent on the waiver wire on a week to week basis that streaming is like a viable thing that you can do in this league. And it's harder to replace those just like insane all category contributors in the outfield. Skeens is amazing, right? Like I think he might be the number one dynasty pitcher, but I'm not sure that puts him above the number 10 through 15 dynasty position players. That's just my personal take on that.
I agree with that. I think in our format, just bankable offensive production, 4 or 5 categories, is way more valuable than what just about any pitcher, even the elite ones, can provide. And you typically get it without the injury baggage. So that's nothing on Paul Skeens. That's just, I think, our format.
Jack, do you have a prediction on that division?
So I was just thinking about it a little bit, and what I wanted to ask you guys is, if Graydon's team, well, really quick, Drew, do you? I'm going to throw the question back at you, and I have a point. I'll get to it. But are you a Graydon or Ryan person for next year?
I think I'm going to have to go with Ryan. I think the pitching is too good, and I understand streaming is an option. Graydon's staff is in a weird spot where it's not really his whole roster is not set up for streaming, and the pitching staff's not good enough to consistently win. Whereas I think Ryan can win pitching week to week against you and Graydon and just win those interdivisional pitching matchups, and that might be the difference.
Interesting. Okay, so what I was assuming you were going to say Graydon as well, and what I was going to ask is what went wrong for Graydon last year to finish? He finished last in the division, right? The slight last. He's now, Jacob, your favorite. Drew, you favor Ryan a little bit, but it doesn't sound by a lot. Like, I have a theory as to what went wrong for Graydon and what went right for Jacob specifically. Do either of you have a take on that?
I'll go back to what Jacob just said, though, which is why it's so weird because Jacob's first 3 picks all kind of busted last year. Like, I don't even know how Jacob won still when it didn't even seem like a lot too much went right for Jacob. So, manager difference, I don't know if we want to call that luck. I have no idea. It was super close, that whole division. What's your theory, Jack?
I think it is the manager difference. I think Graydon was one of the poorer week-to-week managers in the league last year. And, we've all heard about Graydon's supposed fantasy prowess across many leagues. So, I think it was disappointing to see him come here and really not make a lot of moves, made a few trades, but like week to week, we have to go back into the details and I'll make sure to do it before we wrap up the podcast. But he had some of the lower roster acquisition numbers, whereas Jacob was just slamming his 4 roster acquisitions week over week. And I think over the course of a season, that really adds up. I mean, Graydon can't really say, like Sean can, for example, that he was just decimated by injuries. Everybody has injuries, Graydon included, me included, everybody. But like Sean had like the injury plague. That wasn't Graydon's story last year. Like I think Graydon's story was his team was fine, but he just got beat by one or two categories too many weeks over the course of a season because he didn't fully take advantage of his roster acquisitions. So let's see if my memory is correct. Am I right that he did not use them very, let's see.
Braden would be second last in total transactions.
And 71 versus 126, right? Like that's an enormous number. That
And
is
this doesn't include just day-to-day roster changes, which Jacob is the master tinkerer, I guess. That's crazy.
I mean, part of that's because my guys don't play every day, you know? Like I
yeah.
literally have to put somebody in because Kerry Carpenter doesn't play against lefties and Brandon Marsh doesn't play against lefties, Alec Burleson, same thing. So like I have to make those changes when I otherwise wouldn't. But there is something to be said about allowing yourself roster flexibility to stream. Everybody focuses on the pitching side, but you can do this on the offensive side too. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people weren't doing last year that I tried to do at least once per week. I would look at all the matchups and hey, Trevor Larnach's going against all right-handed pitchers this week.
He gets 7 games or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm gonna stream Trevor Larnach, and it's kind of unconventional, and I'm allowed to do that because I have the roster flexibility that other teams might not have because the bottom of my roster is so bad. I can just cut those guys and pick up whoever's I think is going to have the hot hand that week, and it worked pretty well last year. That's not something that that's not a position that I want to be in. It's not something that I would bank on being able to do successfully year over year, but it did work for me last year.
Your teams that made the playoffs were 5 out of the top 6 in making active roster changes every day.
Being the exception, which is interesting.
No. Adam's in the top. The green ones, right? So to the top 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, okay, sorry.
It was Ulrich. Ulrich was the one who didn't make it, but he was right there till the end. And Vinny was 7th. Vinny was right after those guys, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7th in day-to-day transactions and setting your lineup. Those are the teams that made the playoffs.
I was
I
thinking
think
of
it's less.
total transactions, but I mean, fair.
Okay,
And I think it might be less to say about the managers. I don't think there's a correlation between being more active means your team has a better record. I think it's like last year in particular, there was a league-wide phenomenon where pitchers just all decided to die. And so that there was a lot of opportunities to stream. Like a bad pitcher stream against the White Sox is equivalent in my mind to a top 15 pitcher going against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. As far as the stats that they're going to put up and what you're able to get away with, last year created some very odd kind of leeway to be able to run those types of strategies and do that really aggressively and have success week over week. That is, I don't think, going to be the status quo going forward. I mean, who knows? If the pitcher injury epidemic continues, maybe that will be a viable thing going forward, and teams need to reevaluate giving themselves more room to aggressively stream, 2 or 3 starting pitchers a week. But I just don't think that that's guaranteed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you capitalize on those opportunities and other teams didn't, and that let you differentiate yourself from your division and make it to the championship. To close the loop on who we think will win the division, Jacob, man, I want to have faith in you. I want to say you're going to do this, but the numbers are just not in your favor. I don't think anyone in this division has overwhelming odds. I think that it is still anyone's division. I think that even if you're maybe not the favorite, Jacob, you're certainly within striking distance. But I'll go in the Graydon camp for now after just shitting on his management strategy. That I think that he probably is set up the best for success, and we'll see if he can deliver.
Graydon was the unanimous winner of the preseason poll last year on who would win that division. Jacob not being the favorite, that's not any territory unfamiliar to you. And we'll see. Graydon's out here. All of you guys, all 3 of your division has made a trade. Actually, is John Duong, maybe Perry might be the only 2 teams that have not made a trade, but everyone's been active. But your division especially, Graydon with 2 blockbusters Ryan with well, we talked about one trade. You and Ryan were an interdivisional trade that we talked about with Jordan Lawler. So very interesting. Three teams that are very active, all of whom probably think they can win. It's a bit of a different dynamic, Jack, than really any of the other three divisions that we have.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think we're all doing the right thing too. Like we started with, are we allowed to swear on this show? We started with a pile of just dog shit, right? Like that's what the draft was last year. After we got past the first like 5 rounds of that draft, you're looking at guys who were like cut in the middle of last season. I think all three of us like are doing the right thing by being really active and like trying to improve our team. I don't know. You guys might not want to talk shit about our division anymore. Like we're not the bottom feeders that everybody thought we were going to be at the when this all got started last year.
I don't think so either. No, I think they're all competitive, well managed, generally speaking, rosters. I'm sure Ryan will blow it up at some point, but he hasn't done it yet.
I think I said at one point that your guys' division, Jacob, finished with the best combined record in the league.
I
But
think it might have. It's close to ours. I think ours just edged it out. True. Yeah.
I think it did. I think it just said, but it was super close. And I was going back and looking at it. I mean, that was the most competitive year we've had since the first year of the league, 2019, before people
Absolutely.
when we started the league, we didn't know we were even going to be dynasty. So, there wasn't the concept of tanking or anything like that. So, yeah. Hey, Jacob, I'm just noticing on the farm system sheet, you have a man left behind, Theo Gillen, just chilling at the bottom of your prospects. He didn't make his way up. So let me fix that for you so you can get a nice good look at your actual. Right. There you go. Theo Gillen slides into the top 100, slides to the top of your farm. He's good. A lot of people say he's the sleeper from, I think last year's draft? So
He didn't have the best pro debut. He's one of those guys. He's another shortstop guy, like just tooled up shortstop. Um, one of them has to stick there. Speaking of prospects, what are your guys' thoughts on MLB Pipeline revealing top 100? Any shocks, any surprises in your own farm systems as a result of that, or do you even put that much stake in those rankings at all?
I'm not the prospect guy, so I'll let you handle this one.
well, I do. There's a reason why we use it as our official rankings and not something else. I think generally people really look forward to those rankings. We have a lot of Baseball America fans in here too. So those are probably the two that people go to the most. Maybe the biggest surprise of an omission from the top 100 was not seeing Jace Young. Because I think I've seen him pretty unanimously top 100 on every other site. So that was interesting to see him omitted from the list. I hated personally seeing Sebastian Walcott above Chase Burns in the aftermath of the trade I made with Graydon. I thought the top three, let's talk the most important one, the top three, I put it in the group chat. I would have had it in a different order. I obviously would have gone Sasaki one, but I would have put Bueller, not Bueller, thing of Walker Bueller. I would have put Walker Jenkins ahead of your man Roman Anthony. So I don't know. What did you feel that they got it right? Would you put Anthony over Sasaki?
I mean, I think Sasaki has to be number one just because this is the whole point of this list is partially to drive engagement, and you want, your super exciting foreign prospect who's throwing the ball 115 miles per hour and has a slider with 37 inches of break. You want that guy number one. His nickname is, I think, Roki Sasaki. I was looking at Wikipedia. His nickname is like the monster of the Reiwa era. And the Reiwa era, I guess, is like the modern era of Japan, like post Emperor. That's just crazy. Like that's insane. I'm glad that he's number one. I think it's like good for the game.
And good for
Roman
Matt.
Anthony, yeah, and good for Max, definitely, especially in that Dodgers sliding into the Dodgers everyday rotation. Roman Anthony, I think, is number two for me personally, trying not to look at it from a biased perspective, but the guy just absolutely destroyed double and then triple A last year as a 20-year-old, and that doesn't happen very often. I'm hoping it's not another case of Jackson Holiday, like Jackson Holiday I'm not giving up on, but I'm hoping that Anthony is a guy that like makes the major league team either out of camp or sometime earlier in the year and actually like contributes to my roster because I kind of need that at this point. He had a fantastic year last year and I'm hoping he can continue it this year.
Yeah. I do say I have one gripe with the list, and it was actually your gripe too, Jacob, which was too many catches. too many Kansas City Royals catchers specifically. I'm a Blake Mitchell owner, and I don't think he's a top 50 prospect. That is such a joke. Jack, I know there's not too much to talk about with your farm here. Is there anything you wanted to highlight with your farm that you saw come out of the top 100? Obviously, you're now a shareholder in Jackson Joe.
I think the most notable thing is I don't know if it's Lazaro or Lazaro. I'm going to go with Lazaro Montes, up to 42. Seattle Mariners outfield prospect, who I traded Joey Loperfido for in a heads up trade last season, who Sean just dropped today for Dylan Moore. So, I mean, I think that was a good move. The only reason Sean owned Montes in the first place was because in a car ride, I brought him up and Sean proceeded to bid 5 BAM on him while sitting right next to me when I had no BAM to compete uh, with him for in the bid. So I'm happy to get him in my farm. I think he's legit. I think he's a couple of years out for Seattle. He might be one of those, really poor defensive outfielders. I think the jury's still out on his and Jacob, you'll probably know a little bit more about his profile than I will, but I'm a little worried about his ability to really. We know he can hit. We know he can hit. Can he play the outfield competently? Will it matter? Not sure. From a fantasy perspective, he should still keep eligibility when he does come up. So that was exciting. He's up at 42, which from not being ranked or being ranked in like the 90s is an enormous jump. And I got good value for him in the trade. So happy
Yeah, I
with
mean,
that.
the comp for that guy has always been Jordan Alvarez, which isn't really fair, But that's who everybody, you look at him and it reminds you of Jordan. He's a gigantic human being from the left side of the plate, mashes the ball, and can't play defense. It does matter in Seattle a lot more than it does in Houston if you can play left field or not. 7 Mariners in the top 100, though. This is easily the best place our farm has been ever, ever since I can remember.
Michael Arroyo sneaking in.
Since our league started, I can think of a few Mariners top 100 offensive prospects, and I want to say J Rod's the only one that's worked out because you guys had obviously Evan White and Jared Kelenic.
I was
Edwin
before
Arroyo.
J Rod. Before J Rod, the only homegrown offensive prospect that you could say truly panned out for the Mariners in the last 20 years was Kyle Seager.
Mm-hmm.
That list is punctuated by guys going
Lewis.
way back now. This is
I
before
was going to say,
FTN time.
you guys did have a rookie of the year, Kyle Lewis.
Kyle Lewis more recently, yeah. But, historically, Mariners' top prospects have been Dustin Ackley, Jeff Clements, Mike Zunino. This is not these guys are not part of any sort of list that you want to be on. And so just I don't know, there's a pessimism among general Mariners fandom that nothing will ever pan out. And I think it's kind of overblown in a lot of places. And there's a lot of people on the Mariners verse that are saying oh, these prospects, they're all overrated or whatever. I genuinely think that a lot of these prospects are seriously good prospects that are going to make a difference for this team in the next couple of years. I'm optimistic about it.
If the Mariners would spend $20 on the team to upgrade the current offensive product, we would just be in the most blessed organizational state behind the Dodgers, who just have infinite resources. Bar the Dodgers, which are in a league of their own, I mean, we have excellent pitchers. We have a decent offensive core, and they play good defense too for the most part. Platinum glove winning Cal Raleigh. With all these young, mostly middle infield offensive prospects, we are going to be a 54% win percentage team for the next decade. It's just that will probably result in maybe one more playoff appearance because we are just apparently broke. I haven't told you this, I told Jacob, but I have a friend who bikes near where John Stanton lives. John Stanton is the owner of the Seattle Mariners. And he biked right by John Stanton a few days ago, and he was out there walking his dog with his wife, and he said, "Sell the fucking team! Fuck you, John!" Because just the city's just had it with this guy. Because we're a top 8, top 10 market by a variety of metrics in terms of viewership and whatnot. It's not a poor city, and we're spending, 135, 140 million on our on-field product. It's just not good. So that's my Mariner rant.
I was listening to Rates and Barrels the other day podcast, Saris and Derek Van Riper, if you don't know it, but they were talking about the Mariners and, said he was looking at the Mariners infield roster and this might be, the word that he used was, this might be the worst infield of all time. And my first reaction was like, just like, I want to defend my team, like there's no way. Then I look at like who we're trotting out there. It's not the worst infield of all time, right? But it might actually be the worst infield in the MLB right now. We're
Well, when
looking at,
you are both playing second and third simultaneously, that's a huge hole in your
yeah.
infield, right?
And
Like,
JP Crawford is still okay, but he's not the defensive guy that he used to be at the premier defensive position. We don't have a first baseman. Like, we
we
literally
have
don't have
Donovan
a,
Solano.
yeah. So it's rough out here, man.
It's going to be Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, J.P. Crawford, and Donovan Solano / Tyler Locklear. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic.
There's some former top 100 prospects in that mix. Have a little faith.
They still have a little promise, but like come May when they're both hitting like 200, like Locklear and Bliss, we're out.
For the sake of my own team, I hope the Mariners do something because I can't handle another league leading whip from Logan Gilbert with only 8 wins. So I feel bad for you guys. I hope my Cardinals do something too, but we're actually going to go the other way first. We're not even trying to get 54% wins. We're trying to bottom out right now. So it's sad days for us. I want to talk a little bit about everyone saw memed in the group me to death Ulrich's farm system taking the largest dip since the '08 financial crisis. That was absolutely hilarious to see. I want to talk about going the other way, and there's actually a lot of red on this, but what I've done is I have highlighted in yellow day one projected opening day guys that can impact Max's roster. If for those of you who don't know, Max since 2019, his first year in the league, increased his winning percentage every single season. 2019 to 2020, 20 to 21, 22, 23, 24. Last year was the first year his winning percentage didn't improve. He went down a little bit. No one's saying that he can recover and like now all of a sudden make a push to beat Adam. But I think he's firmly in the wild card race because he never bottomed out and he arguably has the strongest system now and has 2 top 5 prospects from day one. The guys in orange are not far behind.
I was
I'm
doing
just
a bit of research. Go ahead.
go ahead. You
I was just doing a bit of research before we got on here, looking at some farm systems. And I, I mean, JD, I think, has the best farm in the league. I don't think that's really, many people have a different opinion on that. I would actually put Max number 2, and I had no idea, like literally no idea. I hadn't been, actively trading with Max, so I hadn't been looking at a lot of his prospects. This is a lineup that's going to contribute and going to contribute soon, to the point that you made. Those guys don't always contribute in year one, like Jackson Holiday, for example. You never know what you're going to get with rookies. I think that this team is going to be vastly improved by the end of the season, though, when these guys start getting some reps.
And then next year he gets Munetaka Murakami coming over to play third base for his team. I mean, it's just going to keep going.
2 years ago, Max, I don't know if Max had confidence that this league would sustain itself beyond maybe 4 or 5 years. So he didn't really try to build a farm or anything like that. He had famously traded away a ton of Bam to Ben for Pete Alonso back in the day. And he's like, screw it, I'm not going to build anything. I think 2 years ago it clicked for him. Hey, this league's actually going to be around. And he, in 2 years, has built arguably the best farm system. Maybe, yes, JD still up there in that convo. But it's amazing to see what Max has done. I'm going to scroll down and show you guys one other name. Mr. Hyseon Kim is here. Like, he can I don't know what's going to happen with the Dodgers exactly. Sounds like he's going to be a utility guy, but then they traded Lux. Who knows exactly, but he can contribute. Just being on the Dodgers and being a mostly everyday player, that's good enough for a roster spot. So, a lot coming from Max.
I agree that Max is definitely a wild card contender. But I do wonder if, even if all these guys come up and contribute decently, it might come down to like my team would need to completely collapse or Sean would need to have, serious injury issues again for him to really like be the favorite for that spot because this team's pitching is just not deep. I mean, I think his top guy is probably Dylan Cease, Justin Steele, And then after that, you're talking about your like Tyler Anderson, Michael Lorenzen, Merrill Kelly, Jordan Montgomery, like all of these like fringe guys that really might not even make the starting rotations of a lot of teams. So, I mean, I think for Max to be a bona fide wildcard contender, he needs to trade from his just absolute wealth of second baseman to a needy team such as myself, who also happens to possess 14 starting pitchers that Max could really, really use. So if you're listening to this podcast, expect to get some messages from me in about 20 minutes. You're going to be inundated with trade offers. So
One more point about Max's farm. I was just looking at the list again. I haven't even heard of like a third of these guys. Like his farm is amazing, right? But like, who the fuck is Ioannis Alexandrov?
Yeah.
A 20-year-old catcher first base
Okay.
prospect? Like,
There's a lot of
who are these
people.
people?
this
There's
was
a
a
lot of
joke.
people with some trash prospects, Jacob. Like you can go back and it'll be a fun deep dive for you to go look at some of the guys that like Ben and I have bid on in the past. Do you know the story of Ioannis Alexandrov, Jack?
Well, I think that he was bid on simply to diversify Max's farm geographically. Isn't he from, like, he's like a Dominican guy of some sort of, like, I don't know, Slavic
Yeah,
heritage, I
sounds
assume?
real Dominican. Yeah,
Well, he's playing in the DSL. That's why I say that.
you combine Vladimir Guerrero and Ioannis Alexandrov, and you just get an actual Russian.
Yeah,
He's Bulgarian. And
Bulgarian.
so I think what I want to say a few years ago, some notable website, I don't know if it was Baseball America, but somebody started ranking the top European prospects. So not even international, like Dominican, like what we see on MLB.com. Somebody started ranking the top European prospects. Ioannis Alexandrov was on that list. I think he may have been somebody's like OOTP legend that made it onto to like a viral Reddit post. So Max bid on this guy because again, Max wasn't taking this super seriously and building a farm system. Max tries to get all the Asian prospects and then he randomly got Ioannis Alexandrov. He was a Cubs guy. I'm pretty sure he made it through like a single minor league season in their organization. He's already gone. So he's a nobody.
It's not over till it's over, Ioannis. Never know.
Catcher, first base. Oh my gosh.
I don't even know if Jacob knows. I mean, you've probably seen like Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray's over here with Ben. So
Yeah, well, I just kind of expected that from.
Well, Drew Fowler was a prospect until he was medically retired due to a slipped disc, Drew?
yeah,
Yeah. You were catcher, shortstop, dual eligible?
left-handed.
Yeah. Switch hitter.
That's pretty enticing, not gonna lie.
You're like my MLB The Show player, except I also pitch and throw 100.
With both hands like Urangelo?
Exactly, yes. I forgot about that guy. I forgot that the Mariners drafted. That was our first overall pick last year, right, Jacob? Durangelo?
Yeah, we got him in the first and Ryan Sloan in the second, I think.
That's right.
He's not gonna be.
Who's the Sloan owner? Is that me?
You have Sloan. I did see Sloan at number 100. I think it was on NBC Sports top 100 list. I will say too, Max has Urangelo. He got him for I think 13 BAM last year. So
Yeah, that's 6.5 BAM per hand. That's pretty cool.
guys, I don't know what Ben's gonna do. I don't know what he's gonna do with his pitching. He's throwing out day one Joe Ryan, Bryce Miller, Ryan Pepio, fine. And then it's DJ Hers, SP4. What's he gonna do? What would you guys do if you were Ben?
Let me pull up his team here. I mean, this guy just needs to stop trading, especially with you. Not that it really benefits you necessarily, but it's like you guys seem to trade with each other and both your teams get worse. It's just like hemorrhaging value in every exchange that you have. I mean, start with the good stuff. I mean, good if you want to call it good. There's some guys on his offense that are like they could experience significant, they could have big growth seasons. Like, I think we'll just start from the top. Like Shea Langoliers last year, I mean, I'm disappointed because I had traded for him with Sean and then cut him, and I didn't really need a catcher, so I don't know why I did that. But he had a good fantasy season, and on most catching lists, he's a top 10 catcher. And in Dynasty, he'll be creeping toward the top 5 or 6 or so. So, I mean, that's a good piece. I still think Vinny P is very solid. It's hard for Zach Geloff to be worse, especially in the park that he's going to. And even when he was bad, he wasn't a nothing just because like power speed at a position that there's no depth in, like it plays. Like if he cut Zach Geloff, he'd be swooped up in a heartbeat. Not that I don't think he's like a great baseball player. It's just that like he kind of does the things you need in fantasy. I mean, he just added Jose Caballero today, so I'm not really going to comment on that. But yeah, like CJ Abrams, again, off the field issues aside, CJ Abrams is showing up everywhere, top 6, top 7 shortstops. We know Adam hates him, but I'm in on CJ Abrams, been trying to trade for him all offseason. Like, he just does the things you need him to do. Michael Toglia, who Jacob and I have a kind of distant connection to that I'll let Jacob touch on here in a second. But Michael Toglia just could be that masher in Colorado. He had a great second half last year. I didn't think he was going to cut it in the big leagues. I thought he had too much swing and miss, but he corrected some of those issues and plays for a shitty team. He easily has 40 homer power. Probably won't really tap that, but he could. I'll stop there, but there's a bunch of guys like that like could be good, but they all have to be good for Bean to even have a fighting chance. To even have a fighting chance. It's not that there aren't interesting guys, but it's that there are no pillars on this team. There is nobody who you can look at and just get bankable production for, except for DH only Brent Rooker, who I guarantee you will not survive the season on Bean's team, because Bean will look for 2 16-year-old Dominican kids and be like, great, that's what I want. And like, he does it every year. He does it every single year. Like, he can get on the cusp of being good. He's like, yeah, 2 more years, I'll rebuild. And he's just going to stay at the bottom of this division until he like picks a path, and also just spends his BAM better, because he's probably had more, BAM accessible to him than any team in the league. I'm very curious who has like the most BAM he's bid on prospects or used in trades, Drew. You could probably pull that data pretty quickly. It's got to be Bean, though, or Bean's got to be close. And his farm system isn't a top system. His team's not a top team, and we're 5 years in. So I think this is one of the more mismanaged teams. I'm not sure he would fight that. I think he maybe kind of knows, but I don't know what he's going to do. I think he's got to kind of stay the course, see who's good, and start picking some guys up waivers and just holding tight and trying to fight for a wild card, because it's accessible. Like, there's no team, I think, other than Bean, really, that can't take that wild card slot in that conference. But like, he doesn't commit to it.
I have definitely. Jacob will speak next, but I just wanted to interject and say that a year ago, maybe last offseason, I calculated like a return on BAM. And yeah, Ben far and away has spent more BAM than any other team, meaning he's had more of it available to him. So I'll have to see if I can pull that data. I want to hear the Michael Toglia story, Jacob, and the connection. I want to hear your thoughts on
Yeah.
it. But I do want to remind everyone that it was when you joined the league last year and you hopped on the podcast for the first time, or it was at some point, you said you kind of liked Ben's offense, and that got a lot of people kind of heated because no one liked Ben's offense. So
I
you can.
still like it. I still like it. I like his core. I like the core that he's got going on. And not for the reasons like I think that some of the points that Jack made are true. I don't think that you need solid anchors to put up like a feasible offense on a week to week basis. You do in a roto league, you do not in this format. I don't think that he managed his team in a way last year that made the best use of those pieces though. And he had some injury stuff, right? Like CES didn't play at all. Nolan Jones was hurt for most of the year. But I like a lot of these like core pieces. I like CJ Abrams a lot. I still believe in Zach Geloff. Vinny P is a masher and could potentially be a top 5 first
We're
baseman.
aligned so far. Yeah.
Nolan Jones, like if he's like half of the player that he was in 2023, that's a very solid fantasy asset. And I would trade my entire pitching staff to him for his entire pitching staff in a heartbeat. Right? Like my pitching staff isn't. Nobody would accept that. My pitching staff is terrible. But Pepio, Miller, those guys are good. Like there's some injury risk there, but they're good players in good organizations that are going to put up, potentially like 160, 170 innings of good production this year. And you
But
don't
there's
need
3
more than
guys.
like
That's where it stops. He's got
you
3
don't
guys.
need that much more than that if you stream effectively, which he hasn't, but I'm not saying that he can't.
Okay.
Anyways,
You're a high man on Bean year 2.
Yeah, I like the roster. I do like the roster. I think there's some interesting pieces here.
Ben,
As far as Michael Tolia, though, we went to school. Jack and I both went to school with Michael Tolia's cousin, nephew. It gets weird. He's from a big family. He's from a big family, and some of the lines are I don't know exactly how they're all related, but Michael Tolia is from Gig Harbor. Yeah, he's an Olympic Peninsula kid, like myself and like Jack. We'll always be rooting for him. He's a cool dude. And yeah, the guy that we grew up with goes to like all of his games, was at his debut and stuff. He gets like tickets for free and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Jacob is also a really big Stuart Fairchild fan.
Yeah, my ex teammate. I have two ex teammates in the MLB. One of them is Stuart Fairchild. These were on like travel ball teams that I was on growing up. Stuart Fairchild's from Seattle too, so I played with him. And the other is Drew Rasmussen, pitcher for the Rays, who, these guys were like they were so much better than everybody else on the field when I was playing with them. So, but it's just kind of cool that some of those guys made it.
well, Rasmussen, I think, just signed an extension.
He did. Yeah. Injury issues last year. I think he's had two Tommy Johns, but the Rays still believe in him, which is cool.
Big part of what Sean's trying to do on his team. And I haven't heard Stuart Fairchild's name in a bit, but Cincinnati Reds legend, a lot of people in this fantasy group would know him. Ben or Perry, guys, who's going to finish with the worst record? Assuming those are your two picks for the worst records at each conference.
Who's going to finish with the worst overall record? That's your question. I think it's got to be Perry just because of strength of opposition, especially if you're in on Max. You're in on all the. I mean, and even if I'm not like the high man on your team, Drew, but I still think your team is competitive. I think that Perry's and he has to play Adam 4 times. Like it's not even really fair. Like if you ask me whose team I think is better, I'd probably go presently. I'd actually say Perry, but the strength of competition is just going to be brutal. I just think Perry's really going to be slogging through it for a while. And I think in some sense, Perry maybe drew the short end of the stick in terms of how things happened. He took over a franchise that Ryan just left in shambles, and then Ryan gets to come back and start over. That's pretty rough. I think that Perry deserves an easier division. If we ever do realignment, randomize it, but make sure there's a few criteria. And one of those criteria has to be that Perry cannot be in the same division as Adam. That's like the one thing that can't happen.
Is Perry owed reparations from Ryan?
I think he 20 BAM per infusion reparation.
That's crazy. The only two teams we haven't really touched on, and sorry, Perry, I know that's all we said was that, but Adam and JD will get pissed if we have a podcast where we don't talk about arguably the top two teams in the league. And let's just confirm this. Are they the two favorites? Because I would say they're the two favorites, one from each
They're the
conference.
two favorites from a alignment perspective in the championship game, but I would say that I would personally put Jack's team above JD at the moment, especially with the Judge addition.
I agree with that, and it's been the same way for years. Alignment's been before that it was is it Jack and Adam or Jack and JD for alignment purposes too, as Adam's team was improving starting in 2022 when Adam and I played in the semifinal and had a very close matchup. So I mean I would expect JD and Adam to, again, all of the things being equal, Jacob went on a great run, and in one playoff week, anything can happen. Just like in real baseball, I would still say those are the odds-on favorites to face each other.
I would go even further. I would say that I think that JD is losing ground by not trading in the offseason. I think that other teams are taking advantage of that and moving into positions that he's not able to do. And he has an amazing farm, but he's going to have to roster manage some of these guys. And I would have liked to see him trade some of his major league pieces that are maybe getting up there in age to make room for some of these prospects. I don't know how he's going to manage it. He'll probably find a way because he's a good manager. But yeah, just my 2 cents.
Drew, could you do really quick the same thing you did for Max, showing us which of his farm pieces are likely to impact the roster this year? Do the same for JD, because I agree with Jacob, and especially with JD's strength of farm. If he has a bunch of guys, particularly offensive pieces, graduating, he could have a real problem in terms of just like he could lose a lot of value if he doesn't make some trades. And maybe this is not the year where that comes to a head. Maybe that's next season, but it's got to be soon. And this is a crunch that I experienced really in 23, where my farm was never super deep, but I had a lot of guys that would have been highlighted in yellow, and I had to make some difficult cuts because I didn't manage them appropriately either. And Adam's been having kind of similar problems as well.
Yes. I don't want to I don't want to lose fact. I don't want to lose where Jacob just said JD's a great manager. I actually think JD has cost himself more wins as a manager than any other owner. He is so committed to the volume pitching strategy that I have seen him lose matchups because of it when he has a almost practically sure lead when he doesn't need to be doing what he does. But whatever. Um, I should scroll up and I should show Christian Campbell. So I don't know when Christian Campbell, who came out of nowhere, not even in the Red Sox top 30 prospects to begin the year, and then ends up as the number 7 prospect in baseball. It's crazy. People said he had a super weird hitch in his swing and they didn't think it would work against high level pitching. Apparently, that's no longer an issue. And so now he's a god tier prospect. So, Christian Campbell, we will see. Do we like what do we know for sure? We know Junior Caminero is going to be up and JD's going to have to add him to his roster very quickly. I don't think this is a Bam Chise tag candidate. This is just going to happen. Bubba Chandler, I think, is expected to start the year in Pittsburgh's rotation to go with Jared Jones, Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller. Actually gives them an insanely high ceiling top 4. I love that for Pittsburgh. Caden Dana, just like you might expect with the Los Angeles Angels, another guy shoved through the system super fast. Got a taste last year. I don't see a situation where he's not in the rotation to begin the year this year. Jace Young might be the wild card here, where he might take a little bit more time, but the Tigers aren't exactly making splashy free agent signings right now. Jace Young is probably there penciled in for an everyday role. So 4 guys, Jacob, I don't know if he has 4 roster spots to cut right now.
Well, and
The thing
AJ
is, he has
too, right? Like he's going to be pitching unless he's still hurt. I don't remember, but he's going to pitch for Atlanta.
there's also Shane Baz. Shane Baz is on this list too. There's the thing is like JD has so much BAM. He can BAM tries tag a lot of these guys and just keep kicking the can down the road. But I mean, you're risking their value dropping by doing that.
Me and Michael Kopech to Brian Hayes. No 2 players have done more to set my franchise back than Michael Kopech. Well, no more than James Paxton, but after James Paxton, I would say Michael Kopech and Brian Hayes.
A roster crunch is coming. JD has made big, ginormous trades in the past where he's traded, it was like 12 prospects.
Max Scherzer trade.
Yeah, for like Max Scherzer and like 7 prospects, 4 of which were top 100 for Nolan Arenado. So he's been willing to make the big move in the past. If this truly is his last year in the league, I would fully expect him to do the same at some point this season, but we'll see.
We hope not. We hope not. We hope to have JD here for years to come.
Speaking of realignment, I actually had this penciled in last year as a segment to do with you, Jack, whenever you were on the podcast, but I don't think we got you on the podcast during the season last year. I think you only did an off-season one. So I'll ask this. I'll have you go first, Jack, because I think you probably know what you're going to say. Jacob can think about it. If you were commissioner for a day, what would you do?
But it would not be realignment because I want there to.
It wouldn't be because you've supported that in the past.
I still support it, but I want that to be like this is not me being a dictator. Like there's definitely things I would be a dictator about, but realignment is not one of them. Like I want people to be both interested in that. And like I like our division. It's fun to compete. We have good rivalries, and you do lose that a little bit. I mean, I think eventually it's just going to be the natural thing to do. We're going on what now is our 6th full season in the league? 7th full, really? 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Wow, 7th season. I mean, 7 seasons in with no divisional change. I mean, I think that probably that conversation needs to happen, and it should probably happen during the season preceding when you do it. So, like, maybe we should talk about it. But if I were commissioner for a day, oh, man. I mean, I've always wanted to get rid of wins, right? I've always wanted to kill the wins and put in some quality starts. And I think that given the way my roster is composed right now, I have a lot of good pitchers on winning teams. where in the past I had a lot of good pitchers that maybe weren't on winning teams. So I don't know that I still feel that way, if I would still do that. Oh man, Commissioner for I know what I would do. I would split Shohei Ohtani into two players. Adam could keep them both because I'm not going to make him lose a player, but he has to have two roster spots for Shohei Ohtani. That's what I would do.
Unfortunately, even as a commissioner, I don't have that power. If you were president of ESPN Fantasy, you might have that.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So getting rid of wins, that's a popular one. Discussing realignment, that's a popular one. And then the switch to Shohei Ohtani, I don't think that would be controversial. I think even Adam realizes that. Such a fucking cheat code. Jacob, have you had time to think about it? If you were commissioner for a day, you have 1 year of experience in FTN, initial reactions from the league. Like, is there anything that you've come in and like, wow, they could really be doing this better?
When you first asked the question, I thought it was going to be like commissioner of the MLB, like Rob Manfred.
You should
And I
do
was
that
getting
too.
ready to be like, yeah, like seize the means of production, relegate the Dodgers to AAA. But for this, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like the a lot of the setup that we have. I do think that there's one position in particular that is de-emphasized in this league, and people aren't going to like this, but it's catchers. And I would add a second catcher spot, which is something that a lot of fantasy leagues do.
In
I just
favor.
think it makes you think a lot more about some of the deeper options that are available. Because as it is right now, you don't really need like a top tier catcher to do anything. And there's a reason why there's yeah.
This is the waiver wire, and over 50% of the top 20 players available are catchers.
The prospects too. Like nobody wants to bid on catching prospects for that reason. So that's one thing. I would also probably consider making another IL spot. And this one might also be fairly unpopular because some of the roster crunching, nobody likes it, but deep down it's kind of fun, having to make those decisions. But just with the way that the MLB is trending, there's so many players that are hurt. There's so many players that aren't hurt but are still going on the IL because of what teams are doing. Just another IL spot for flexibility, especially with like a very deep roster, including like all of our farm systems. More people on your team to manage is more fun in my opinion.
You, with the second catcher, would be bailing out Adam from having to make a very tough decision on his incoming Samuel Basayo and Adley Rutschman decision.
Especially given Adam has two guys locked into util with Schwarber and Ohtani.
What
Why
would you
stop
do?
at two? Why don't we do three catchers? Why not four catchers?
Would
Just
you
entirely catcher league. We should
would
just
you
become a
remove
catcher league.
would you remove a util spot?
No, I wouldn't remove a util
You
spot.
just add an offensive spot
Yeah,
catcher.
increase the rosters by two, one for catchers and one for IL.
I'd favor that.
Interesting conversations to have this season. With something like that's a big enough change, we'd have to give a full year at least of notice to the league, but I'd be open to discussing that. So any other commissioners that are listening, we can
There's one
discuss.
other idea that I just thought of too, which is a minimum holding period. This would probably actively work against my strategies, but for pitchers especially, I was thinking like if you add a player, you can't drop them for 2 weeks. It would create some more interesting kind of thoughts in terms of looking ahead on the schedule and trying to extract maximum value out of guys that are on the waiver wire versus just like streaming everybody against the White Sox.
That is quite the administrative undertaking to monitor that from a commissioner perspective. Although, Jacob, if anyone has the skills in the league to build a tool to help us monitor that rule, it would be you. But I don't disagree with the premise of that rule. Like, that makes sense to me.
I could potentially be persuaded. I just did a division randomizer for us. I want to get your take on this new division. Although the last one you're just gonna love. So here I'll give you the first one here. This is both of your divisions. We have a division of Drew, Graydon, and Jacob. What do you make of that division? I think that would be three teams in kind of a dogfight. I think that's three competitive rosters. I think that's a lot of rivalry, especially between you and Graydon, Drew. I think that would be very fun. So I like that one. Any thoughts?
I'm a
Jacob?
fan. I like playing against Graydon. We had a lot of good matchups last year. I ended up winning most of them, which was nice. But I think that would be a fun pairing of everybody. I think, like you said, a lot of those teams are in pretty similar positions. It would be competitive.
I think For me, it's a bit of a special case because I think I'm the only person in the league who's met every single other person. So I kind of just would have a natural rivalry with anybody. Arguably, Jacob, you're the person who I would have the least rivalry with since I probably know you the least. But I think that would be fun for you and Graydon to continue what's a great budding rivalry. I actually love their current division. I just wish they had a super team. And unfortunately, there's only three super teams. So you can't have one in every division. You just have one super division, I guess. But that is a very interesting first division. So that leaves no super team in that one. So we'll see how they shake out in the other ones.
Sean, JD, and Vinny.
Love it. I love
I
it.
love
Two Rockies fans.
two Rockies fans together. I think that adds some more competition for JD. You're swapping out Sean for Ben. That's a big difference. So then we'd finally be able to test the case like, is JD's success just a product of his division, or could he prove it? Next one, I see you probably have to go cook dinner here, Jacob. Next one is my personal favorite, the division of Ryan, Ben, and myself, Jack. I would really love this one.
Veto.
And if anyone noticed, that means that we have one division that remained identical. Adam, Max, and Perry in the randomizer, they kept the same division. This cannot be allowed to happen. Perry needs reparations.
Harry.
This cannot happen.
So we'll wrap this up. I know you guys over in, I guess actually, Jack, where are you? Are you even in Seattle right now? Are you in
I'm in DC.
Yeah, dinner time for Jacob. If we were to ever explore realignment, I promise you it would be a random division every year. It would not be a cycle. It would not be new divisions, and then we have those long term. It would be random every year. That's how we would do it. So if it ever happens.
Okay. Well, good. I think we can maybe wrap up there.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, guys. This was a lot of fun. We can talk more if the season begins. I'm sure we'll have a flurry of more trades before the season starts. Plenty to talk about. So thank you guys for your thoughts, and we'll see everyone later.
Yep. Thanks.